everyone, and welcome to today's video of ZK Studies, where we are going to be focusing on vaccination. So let's get started. Now, vaccination involves introducing an attenuated form of the pathogen into the body to prepare the immune system for a future infection. So there are four main types of vaccines that we could come across. First, there are vaccines which include live pathogens, but they're treated to be made harmless. Another form of vaccines include harmless fragments of the pathogen, so smaller pieces or parts. And remember, pathogens are disease-causing microorganisms. The third method that we could have vaccines are vaccines including toxins, which are produced by pathogens. And we could also have dead pathogens in vaccines. And these are just the types of vaccines that we have to come across in IGCSE, but there are different types, including the mRNA vaccine, which was used for COVID. So let me just go ahead and highlight some keywords. Okay, and also when we say that the vaccines contain a harmless form of the pathogen, it means that an immune response will still be induced, but it won't have the same effect as an infection might do, so it's much less severe on the body. Okay, so as we said, a weakened or attenuated version of the pathogen is identified or genetically modified, and then they're injected through vaccination. So that's how vaccines are administered. So they're identified or genetically modified, and then this is administered to the person via an injection. And now what happens is that the person's immune system will respond. So, immune response, where white blood cells notice antigens that are present on the surface of pathogens. So they identify that the pathogen is foreign to the body. And now we have specific types of white blood cells called lymphocytes, which produce antibodies, and these have different effects on pathogens. Lymphocytes produce antibodies, and these are Y-shaped proteins which are specific to the antigens of pathogens. Okay, so there are a couple of effects that antibodies have. So what antibodies can do is they bind to the pathogen, which makes it more easily recognizable to phagocytes, so they can be engulfed. They make it difficult for the pathogens to enter host cells. They cause agglutination to occur. Where the pathogen gathers together. So pathogens collect or gather, which makes it impossible for them to enter host cells because they're too big. And it's easier for phagocytes to engulf them in one go. Finally, when antibodies bind to pathogens, they could also release a complement, which creates a small hole in the pathogen. And this causes water and different ions to enter. Eventually resulting in lysis, or bursting. So the pathogen bursts. Now, apart from antibodies, what happens is that memory cells are also manufactured. So they are manufactured by the body our immune system. And this means that in the case of a future infection, our body can produce antibodies quicker and produce more antibodies within a specific time. So greater number of antibodies and sooner. And this process is shown by the graph over here. So you could see the secondary response occurs much more quickly, and the number of antibodies produced is a lot higher compared to the primary response. Okay, so we have covered vaccination. Now we can also take a quick look at the different types of immunity. And the first form we have is active immunity. And active immunity is when antibodies are produced in the person's own body. So they themselves experience that immune system response. And there are both natural and artificial sources of active immunity. So, for example, a natural method might be that pathogens just enter the body, for example, like catching a cold. Or just being infected. And then you have artificial, and an example of artificial active immunity is when a pathogen is introduced into the body as a vaccine. The second type of immunity is passive immunity. And passive immunity is when antibodies from another organism enter the person's body. And there are also both natural and artificial forms of this. For example, by crossing the placenta into the fetus. And as for artificial immunity, antibodies could be injected into a person. So antibodies injected, and I believe this is the case for example in the rabies vaccine, as well as for when antivenom is introduced to the body. And what we say is that active immunity is more effective and long-lasting compared to passive immunity.